Hi, and welcome to the AMP1 podcast. I am your host, Alex West, and today I'm taking a little departure from the normal two-person format. I'm doing something a little bit by myself. This is something I haven't done in a while. I did it a little bit early on. I sort of just sat down and got out my thoughts on the NBA, and I thought the first two nights of the season would be a good time to try this again. So let me know if you like it. Hit me up on Twitter at AlexWestNBA. Make sure you're following the show at AND1 Analytics. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes. You know, all the things that you want you to do. But until then, enjoy the podcast, and Brent, take us away. All right, so I haven't been on air since this happened, so this is my first chance to talk about it. The Gordon Hayward injury to his left ankle. He broke his tibia, he dislocated his ankle, and went in for surgery last night. And it was rough. That was a rough injury. I've seen my fair share of injuries, both basketball, football related. The Sean Livingston injury jumps to mind. Kevin Ware from Louisville. Even the Paul George leg break in the Team USA scrimmage. Like, those are the ones that jump out at me. And this was particularly rough. Like, I'm not sure. I don't want to do like a broken leg power rankings, but this one was pretty bad. And it was interesting to see how it was handled. Everybody seemed to be like really professional about it and take care of it. But there were moments there where I was not sure anybody was going to be able to continue, and they did. He is going to be out for some time. I saw a timetable that said he could be back as early as March. I saw one that said he could miss the entire season. And I think that's fair at this juncture. Like, we don't really have any idea what's happening with Gordon Hayward and how he's going to feel. So I am totally fair with the Celtics slow playing him. And if he doesn't come back this season, he doesn't come back this season. But it poses an interesting question, and it puts the Celtics at a, sort of a crossroads situation where they have to figure out what their new direction is as a team. And I think that Coach Brad Stevens, a guy, who's just heralded around the league as being a smart coach, is going to figure it out, but it is going to take some time. Kyrie Irving asked to be traded from Cleveland because he wanted to be the man, and now this mantle is being thrust upon him, whether he wants it or not. A lot of the young guys are going to be looking for him to be a leader, not just a scorer, not just a good player, but a leader. And it's him, and it's Al Horford, and then it's a bunch of young guys who don't have a lot of NBA experience under their belt. The addition of Marcus Morris will go a long way when he comes back. He's a good player, but above that, he's also a veteran player. I think the Celtics will sort of settle in. I'm not sure. They play the Sixers tomorrow night, so that's going to be a little bit of a test for them. And 0-3 is not necessarily the end of the world, but it is going to be a difficult hole to climb out of. I think you'll see a lot more of Irving, Brown, Tatum, Morris, and Horford lineups, and then Marcus Smart will be able to come off the bench with Terry Rozier and sort of generate offense that way. But on the other side of the ball last night, there was an incredible performance from Giannis Antetokounmpo. He played so well. He looked like an MVP, 37 points, 13 rebounds, and that's just something else, man. We got to start taking this guy more seriously, and I know Bill Simmons said that in a tweet, but 37 and 13 and just carried the team through stretches and looked unguardable in stretches. I'm not sure what his odds are at the moment, but he could be a huge factor, particularly with the Gordon Hayward injury. If Boston does slide down in the standings and Milwaukee can jump into that second seed or maybe jump into that first seed if Cleveland's not heavily invested, there could be a real campaign for Giannis to be the MVP. I wasn't super impressed with the rest of Milwaukee. Brogdon played pretty well. Chris Middleton played pretty well. But outside of that, I still think they need a piece here and there. I'm not sure if it's going to be somebody from the inside. Maybe Greg Monroe is going to step up and play a little bit better. Maybe John Henson. Definitely Tony Snell needs to play better. But it feels to me like that's a roster that's still just missing a piece, and maybe they'll get it from development from a player, a younger player, or maybe they'll have to go outside of the organization and trade for somebody as we get closer to February and March. But that will be something to follow pretty closely. They play the Cavs tomorrow night, so Bucks-Cavs, that's a big game, and it's a big test for Giannis to get to be to go against LeBron. I mean, he's probably going to guard LeBron a lot of the game, and LeBron's probably going to guard him because the Cavs don't have a lot of wing stoppers. So that's definitely going to be worth watching. I mean, a good Friday night game of Milwaukee and Cleveland. And talking about Cleveland, I just wanted to talk about them for a second. I noticed this weird little thing, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they try this against the length of the Bucks tomorrow night. But they've been playing this back to the basket. LeBron's almost playing center a little bit more, and they did it against the Celtics. And also, if you go back to Game 5 of the NBA Finals, they did it a little bit, where LeBron will set up sort of 8 to 10 feet out, take 2 quick dribbles, spin move, and lay the ball in. And it's taken advantage of his strength and his agility, and not so much his athleticism and his ability to get to the rim as a cutter or as a driver, but a little bit of a gear shift for LeBron. He's geared down a little bit and is playing a little bit with a little bit more strength. And I think that's something that's going to be very interesting to their season to follow, because of the implication of maybe LeBron's getting a little bit older, but his adjustment to getting a little bit older is done very, very well. LeBron, obviously a phenomenal player, but this kind of adjustment can really prolong his career, and it can prolong his effectiveness. You saw the great pass that he hit Kevin Love for the three-pointer in the fourth quarter of the game against the Celtics. He's a guy who can play with his back to the basket. You know, back to the basket scores have been maligned for the past couple of years because they don't really fit in with the space and pace of the modern game. But LeBron is so capable as a passer. He's got great vision. He's got really, really good footwork. I was just watching the film on it again. He looks great doing it. So that's something I'm following with some, pretty bated breath, because if that's the new LeBron, I feel like it's sort of situational. I feel like it's going to be matchup based, and I feel like it's kind of Warriors targeted. And that's something that maybe they saw in that last 8 minutes of Game 5 that could be really effective against a smaller lineup with Draymond at the 4 and Durant at the 5, or whatever, however you want to say that the Warriors line up. So that's something that they're probably going to try and polish throughout the season and then break out in the playoffs and even in the NBA Finals. Last night, switching gears here, the Wizards and the Sixers played. That was the first game on ESPN. It was a good game. I was actually sort of impressed by the Sixers. I have a little bit of a lower opinion, well, particularly than Jeff Van Gundy. Jeff Van Gundy said he could see him being the 4 seed. And I'm a little bit lower on the Sixers than everybody, but I have to say I was pretty impressed with Ben Simmons. He looked great as a rookie. He looked great running the offense. And then, of course, Joel Embiid. Looked like Joel Embiid. He's on a minutes restriction. This is a pretty good team. The pieces that they put around Embiid and Simmons are pretty good. They had 6 guys in double figures, including Robert Covington with 29 points, and that's huge for them. Getting a third guy to get going, I think most projections would say you'd want that third guy to be Markelle Fultz, but they seem to be bringing Fultz along pretty slow, and that, if it works out for the team, is pretty okay. One interesting note, Jahlil Okafor didn't play, so I'm thinking the Sixers are probably going to try to move on from him. I'm not sure what his trade value is on the market. I've talked before about teams like Brooklyn maybe taking a flyer on him, depending on what the asking price is, but that's going to be the development of the Sixers season is what happens with a guy like Okafor, how Fultz comes along, how slowly they decide to pull him along, and how many minutes Joel Embiid can play, because Ben Simmons is going to be there. He's going to play heavy minutes, and he's going to do well. He had an 18 and 10 and 5, which is a really, really nice stat line. I'd like to see a little more in the assist department from him, a little bit more getting the ball out quicker and using his ability to penetrate to create baskets for other players. But obviously that's just something that comes with experience. He is a rookie, even though he drafted 2 seasons ago. He is a rookie this year, and this is his first real game experience. So that's something that he's going to have to develop as he goes along, as he gets a feel for the game. And then on the other side of the ball, the Wizards looked great. They looked like what they had been all along. Last season they looked like they were a John Wall, Bradley Beal, and friends team. I thought that Otto Porter played really well. I thought that Kelly Oubre played really well in spots. Oubre looked particularly nice on a couple of putback dunks. Porter played pretty well in his 33 minutes. He had a 10 and 8, which is not spectacular, but it's nothing to sneeze at either. They're going to be a good team. They need to be a little bit tougher. They need to be a little more cagey. They probably need 16 and 17s out of Marcin Gortat, which is what they got last night. He's 16 points and 17 rebounds. But if they get a little tougher, they're going to be a pretty good team. And they also have lost their Morris brother. He had a sports hernia. It looks like he'll be coming back early in November. So that's a team that has a lot of their core together, and that consistency is going to be their strength. They know each other very well, and that'll help them sort of as they pick through the next couple of weeks. I know they have a trip out west, so that consistency and that familiarity is going to be a big boon for them as they take that trip. And then the second game on ESPN was the Spurs and the T-Wolves. And the Spurs look like they never miss a beat, even though Kawhi Leonard was not playing. They just came out and ground out a win, and DeJounte Murray looked great. And, this is the Spurs. This is what they do. You don't need the particular cogs in the wheel. You just need somebody out there, and Pop's going to get it done. But I was very impressed with LaMarcus Aldridge. Aldridge had a 25 and 10, and obviously on the broadcast they made this huge deal about him going to Pop and talking about having the ball more and playing his role and being a consummate professional. And that's all great stuff. But it's nice to see him actually put some production up instead of just all this story. It's nice to see him a little bit more involved and a little bit more effective. And honestly, that's kind of scary. I know people weren't impressed with the Spurs offseason, but the acquisition of Rudy Gay looked really good last night. Gay has sort of transformed himself into an efficient scorer over the past couple of years, even though being out of the limelight. He was 5 for 9 last night, 14 points. He played good defense. That's what you really want from Rudy Gay. And then so you have Murray, you have Aldridge, you have Gay, and then obviously you're going to add back in Kawhi Leonard, who is a perennial MVP candidate and one of the best two-way players in the game. It looks like it's going to be a solid roster again. I mean, obviously there's going to be some bumps in the road, and there are going to be some bad 20-point losses where we question the Spurs' age. But their development is going to be sort of contingent on those other guys because you know what you're getting from Kawhi. But DeJounte Murray is a guy. Kyle Anderson is a guy. Even when you go down the roster a little bit and you talk about guys like maybe Joffrey Laverne or Patty Mills, these guys, as they go, so go the Spurs, because you know what you're going to get with Kawhi, and you know what he's going to bring to the table on a night in and night out basis. So if Aldridge can be more consistent and a couple more guys can step up in a way that it looked like they were ready to do last night, this is a pretty dangerous team. And the team they played against also looked pretty good in stretches, but also looked pretty bad in stretches. The Timberwolves looked like a team that had a team in transition, a team that had changed a lot over the summer, which is exactly what they were. Their defensive rotations aren't great. They still have a lot to work out on offense. They were getting into their offense really late. That's something I noticed while I was watching. They would get into their offense with 11 seconds on a shot clock, 10 seconds on a shot clock, and end up with a shot that wasn't great. And I think they're probably going to need to utilize a little bit more of the shot clock, developing good shots for guys. Andrew Wiggins looks great. 26 points in 30 minutes. Pretty efficient, 9 for 14 night. And Wiggins, if he develops into the player that we think he is, or even not the player that we thought he was when he was drafted, but the player that we thought he could be, maybe even as late as last year, a player who maybe he's not the best defender, but can score pretty efficiently, and then maybe can defend. A lot of the onus of that has been taken off in the acquisition of Butler, who's going to defend the better wings, and so maybe Wiggins shifting to the secondary wings is going to be really big for his game. But if he can continue to develop like this and he can continue to score, I think there's going to be a really big improvement in his game, so much so that the most improved player buzz may start. Who knows? But he was impressive last night. I need him a little more from Towns, 18 and 13. Towns needs to be in the 20-point range every night for them to be as good as it can be. But over the next couple of weeks, the Timberwolves are going to have to sort of get to know each other on the fly. And their schedule is not easy. I mean, no team in the Western Conference has an easy schedule, but they have to play in Utah on Friday, Oklahoma City on Sunday. And then Oklahoma City, again, the next Friday with a little bit of a reprieve with Indiana and Detroit in the middle of the week. So it's tough sledding for them early on. If they can pick up one win, maybe they can pick up a win in Utah and then play Oklahoma City pretty competitively while they're still finding their legs. They could be in a pretty good position, but there are no easy games in the Western Conference right now. And that's going to be a difficult adjustment for every team, but the Timberwolves, who are already 0-1, and in what I like to call the toughest division in basketball in the Northwest, that's going to be a team that needs to develop pretty quickly. Keeping in that division, let's go to the next game. Let's talk about Utah and Denver. Utah really put on a show in that fourth quarter. I watched the whole fourth quarter, and they went from down 12 to ended up they went in by 10, but they were up as much like 14 there for a little bit. They looked really, really good, particularly on the defensive end. They had 9 steals, which is pretty crazy. Gobert had a fantastic game and an 18 and 10, but his impact, as often it is, Gobert's impact is hard to measure in statistics because he alters shots, he makes teams commit to bad shots, and he was doing all those things last night. There were a lot of other guys on the roster. Joe Johnson was a scalpel. He was used pretty effectively in only 20 minutes. Ricky Rubio played pretty well. Donovan Mitchell, the rookie, looked fantastic in the time that he played, and that's a player that I'm very high on. And I would like to see him get into that rotation and play. He played 26 last night, but I'd like to see him in like the 33, 34 range for him to sort of maximize what he can do. But they look like they're going to be a team that's going to grind it out. They're going to go for 95, 96 possessions a night. And if they can do that, they can do exactly what they did to Denver last night and just sort of grind out these wins in this tough Northwestern division. On the other side of the ball, Denver did not look impressive. Jokic in particular, a guy that everybody's been high on. He had 7 points, he had 12 rebounds, he had 8 assists, which is a pretty good stat line, but you need more scoring from him to sort of buoy the ship. And they just did not get that from Jokic last night. And he will have to learn to score against Rudy Gobert, which I know is a very tough ask of anyone to do, but it's just something that he has to do. And, listen, Gobert's long, he's challenging shots, but you have to figure out a way, whether it's through pick and pops, whether it's through pick and rolls, whatever kind of way that you can use to neutralize Gobert's effectiveness against Jokic. That's what the Nuggets are going to have to do, and I think that plays into the major question that the Nuggets have as a team because they don't have a point guard. Jamal Murray was the starter last night, but Gary Harris handled the ball a lot. Wilson Chandler handled the ball a lot. Moutier came off the bench with 19 minutes. They're just not settled in as a team yet. And that's another team, I talked about the Bucks earlier, but the Nuggets are another team that they might need another piece. They might need one more person. And this, in particular, a distributing point guard will really sort of help them blossom as a team. Jokic is a great distributor. He's a guy who does a lot of things on the basketball court, but I think they need one more player who can slash, who can kick out, who can create shots for other guys. And because while Jokic is a great player, when you key on him, it sort of limits what he can do. And to have a secondary distributor, particularly to pair with a guy like Gary Harris, who looks like he can score the ball pretty well, that's going to be big for them. And they just don't have that guy on the roster right now. And I don't think anybody's going to develop. I think we know what Moutier is. I think we have a pretty firm grasp on what Murray is. And they don't, when you looked at up and down the roster, you just don't see, maybe Will Barton, but Will Barton plays off ball. I don't know. Listen, I'm spitballing here. I watched the game, and this is about the 4th Nuggets game I've watched this season. And I just think they're probably going to need to explore their options in the point guard position outside of the roster. And when they do that, and if they address that concern, it will certainly benefit their team. And that's going to be what Denver is this season. They're going to be a team that just looks a piece short. And in this tough Western Conference, both of these teams, both Denver and Utah, are going to have a very tough time ahead of them because of how clustered that 6 through 11 spot is going to be in the Western Conference. And I think that's what both these teams fall into. And that's just going to be what it's going to be. Another game last night that I want to talk for a minute about was the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. And I really just want to touch on this one briefly. The Grizzlies look like the Grizzlies. They look like pretty grind them out. Mike Conley had a great game. Gasol had 14 and 11, so he looked pretty good. And they had 3 guys in double figures on the bench. Dylan Brooks, the small forward out of Oregon, played really well. I really liked what I saw from him, so that's a player to keep your eye on throughout the season. I mean, 19 points off the bench is pretty impressive for a rookie, and also for a guy who's sort of positionless and is trying to find his way in the league and wasn't a high pick. There's a lot to love about what Dylan Brooks brought to the table last night. But really, just wanted to talk more about the other side of the ball and just touching on this briefly because you can only say the same thing so many times, but this roster looks like it's in complete disarray. Great game from Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis had 33 and 18. That's MVP caliber performance. DeMarcus Cousins had a 28 and 10. That's an MVP caliber performance. And they scored 91 points as a team despite getting 61 from their big two. And listen, they're going to need more. And, maybe Rajon Rondo coming back is going to add to them as a team. They only had one other player in double figures, and it was Etuan Moore. I don't know. I'm not in love with this roster. I did not think they were a playoff team. When I did my over-under, I had them at 39 wins, which after watching last night, I know it's a one-game sample size. Don't kill me on that. But, boy, 39 wins starts to look pretty generous unless they can find some secondary players at any position. And, Ian Clark, maybe he'll come on, play a little bit better. Rajon Rondo will come back. There are a lot of things that can change for this team, as with every team across the course of the season. But they really need an overhaul, and they just need some more shooting. And I don't know, shooting is a precious commodity in this league, and I'm not sure where you're going to find it. So that's the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. I wasn't really impressed with the Pelicans at all. The Grizzlies look good. They looked like they were going to continue what they had been doing despite the loss of a lot of personnel. And then the last game I wanted to talk about from last night was the Rockets and the Kings. The Rockets had already started 1-0 with the nice win over Golden State on Tuesday night, and then had to play on the second night of a back-to-back, moving up the road to play in Sacramento. And they looked tired. They got out with a win. They ended up winning by 5 points. But if you watched any of that game, it was pretty scary in there for a little while. They looked tired, but also the Kings looked pretty cagey. The Kings looked like they were going to take advantage. Buddy Hield, in particular, looked really good being able to score, and they got him the ball in a lot of different ways. And De'Aaron Fox looked like the most exciting rookie in the game. I know a lot of people will say that Dennis Smith Jr. In their loss to the Atlanta Hawks, but I was really impressed with Fox. He's quick, and he really is just going to go in there and get what he's going to get. And they need to get him more minutes, and they need to get him more minutes quickly, but I'm not sure how you do that with a vet like George Hill on the roster. And maybe George Hill's a guy who's going to garner some interest later in the year for some playoff contending team, but 24 minutes is not where I want De'Aaron Fox. I want him in the 30-plus minute range. I was impressed with Willie Cauley-Stein last night also. He had 21 and 10, but he was a big impact on defense. He looked like he could space the floor a little bit, hit a couple of little baseline jumpers, which was really nice. This is a good team, and they're going to win 28 games, but this is a team that is, for the first time in a long time, on the right track, and I'm really impressed with Labissiere, Skal Labissiere. He's good. He looked lengthy. He looked like he could challenge shots, and he had a 12 and 10, which is nothing to sneeze at from your power forward. So they're a team that's going to be cagey. They're going to find some wins. They're going to catch some teams on the backside of back-to-backs and going to win some games. And it's a team that I think as the season goes along, while they won't be great in terms of win total, it's going to be a team that people don't want to see on the schedule because they are going to sneak up and get some games. And I really like that about them. But they got to get Fox some more minutes, and I think that's something that's probably going to develop as he gets a little bit more familiar with the game. Tonight there are 3 games on the docket. The last 3 teams the last 6 teams that have not played. Got Bulls and Raptors at 7:30. Maybe the Bulls will fill the roster. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll all end up fighting each other. What a bizarre story that's sort of taken legs of its own with as other details of it come out. I have been in practices before in many different sports where fights have happened, and I know how that goes, and I know that guys get chippy, particularly when they're working against one another. But for it to happen on a professional level where guys are getting paid and are teammates and have to be teammates is really bizarre. And then the 8-game suspension sort of spoke volumes to me of you want to suspend him because he injured another player, but perhaps it was a little bit more instigated by Mirotic than what you thought, with Bobby Portis only getting the 8-game suspension. I don't know. That team, I had said in the mailbag that was one team that I was not interested in, and then this story breaks, and guess what? Now I am interested in them. And so that's going to be a game worth keeping your eye on just because of the train wreck that it could possibly be with Coach Fred Hoiberg and what's left of the Chicago Bulls. The Raptors are the Raptors are the Raptors are the Raptors. We know what they've been for the past couple of seasons. They just re-upped. They're probably a 48-49 win team in the Eastern Conference, and they're going to make the playoffs and probably get knocked out in the second round. I'm not sure what it would take for me to sort of regain interest in this roster at the moment, but right now it just does not look super great. And Masai Ujiri is one of the smartest dudes in the league. He's a guy who constantly is, both in Denver and now in Toronto, is being smart about his reinvention of rosters and the way he uses guys and the way he finds guys and the way he develops guys. So maybe they've got a trick up their sleeve, and maybe they're going to look to move on from some of those guys, or maybe they've got a very high impression of some of the younger guys on the roster. I'm not sure, but for me, that's going to be what's most worth watching, because this team is what it is, and they drafted OG Anunoby, who is really going to be compelling, but probably isn't going to play this season. So I'm not sure what this roster is right now, and so maybe that's a little bit on, kick that can down the road a little bit, and we'll talk about them in a couple of weeks. The second game this evening at 8 o'clock on TNT, for some reason, is the New York Knicks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I know we're all excited to see the Thunder, and I guess that's why they're on TNT, because the Knicks are going to be really bad. They're going to be Kristaps Porzingis and some other guys, and that's what they're going to be all season long. Hopefully you picked up Kristaps Porzingis in your fantasy league, because he is going to be putting up the numbers left and right, but I'm not sure what I even like about this Knicks team, and I had them down as a 34-win team, but I'm kind of starting to maybe bump that down at 31-32, sort of dependent on Brooklyn, who looked particularly bad last night, and lost Jeremy Lin, who was probably arguably their second best player. So I'm not really interested in that game outside of what the trio of Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook are going to bring to the table. And that's in and of itself probably worth watching, but that's the only reason to watch that game. And then the late night game, which I actually am interested in, this is the one that I really want to watch tonight, the Clippers and the Lakers. The Clippers traded Chris Paul. They're on Danilo Gallinari now. He's sort of that replacement piece. They're going to run point forward with Blake Griffin. And they've got a lot of really cool pieces, I guess. Cool, not a very journalistic word. But they've got Pat Beverly, who is a great defender and can do a lot of things on the court. They got Milos Teodosic, who looks like he can be a really, really great passer, and looks like he might smoke a cigarette at halftime, so that's always interesting. But that's a roster that I'm really going to be keeping an eye on. The Western Conference is obviously stacked. I've talked about it a million times, even just today. But if they can get a lot out of their role-playing guys, but most importantly, they can keep Gallinari and Blake Griffin on the court, that's a pretty good team. And then if they can't keep Blake and Gallinari on the court, they're not a very good team. So, I was listening to the Ringer NBA show, and Kevin O'Connor said something that was just very, very on the nose with the Clippers, that this is a team with a lot of variance of outcome. And so keeping an eye on them all season long is definitely going to be worth it. They're one of the more exciting teams just because of that variance. And fingers crossed they have good health this season, because I really would like to see what this roster can become, because it is a really, really interestingly composed roster. And then obviously you got the LA Lakers. We know what's going on there. They got Lonzo Ball. They got Kyle Kuzma. They got all the hype. People think Brandon Ingram may be 8 feet tall now. I'm not sure. He does look bigger than he did last year. I mean, obviously the story came out early in camp that he'd grown to 6'11" from what he was at 6'9" last year. So by this point, he's probably like 7'5" or 7'6" at least. But he, as a scorer, has a lot of tools, and the Lakers are not going to be super great. On my over-under, I had them at like 29 or 30. They may do a little bit better than that, but they're putting a lot of onus on younger guys. And when you put a huge amount of pressure, I guess is not the right word, but when you put a lot of minutes and you put a lot of what's the right word? I guess pressure is the word I'm going to use, just sort of at a loss for another word. But when you start to put a lot, particularly on offense, on younger guys, you see teams that don't do so well. There are very few exceptions to that. Ball was probably the most exciting rookie to me, because he brings something that translates very well to the NBA game, and that's sort of that contagious passing spirit. He wants to get everybody involved. He has got great court vision. And so he, to me, was probably the most exciting rookie coming into the draft. I'm maybe a little bit more excited about De'Aaron Fox right now, but I definitely am going to be keeping my eye on the Clippers and the Lakers tonight, because I can't wait to see what this young Lakers roster is capable of. And they're gonna steal some games. They're gonna be able to do some things that make you say wow about twice a week. And they may not win a lot of games, and they may be a couple of years away from even being competitive if they don't land LeBron and Paul George. And who knows with all that, but whatever. At least tonight they have a good roster of young players that's going to be worth watching. So those are the 3 games tonight, and I guess that's the podcast, because I don't really have a lot more to talk about. Thanks for listening to me talk for 30 minutes by myself. And hopefully, as the weeks go on, I'll be able to get some more guests. And there wasn't a lack of guests today. I just sort of sat down and decided that I had a lot to say. So if you don't want to hear me talk, please let me know. You can follow me on Twitter at @AlexWest. Nope. You can follow me on Twitter at AlexWestNBA. You can follow the show on Twitter at @And1Analytics. Make sure to subscribe on SoundCloud. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, on YouTube, wherever it is you get your podcasts. And just hit me up with a tweet. Let me know what you think about the show. If you don't like me talking about the NBA, I'll do my best to keep guests on the docket every day. But this was a little bit of a refresher for me, something I hadn't done since the very early episodes. So it's something I'm going to try to do a little bit more, where I just sort of get to sit down and throw out my thoughts on the day and what's going on. And maybe I'll do it in the shorter outlet pass a little bit more often. But I thought this was a fun little exercise for me, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. But hit me up on Twitter. Let me know what you think about it. And until then, for the And1 podcast, I'm your host, Alex West, and have a good night.